Mobster's challenge to Dean Martin, what really happened that night. The King of the Strip. Las Vegas, 1965. The Sands Hotel and Casino glowed like a jewel in the Nevada desert, its marquee announcing in brilliant lights, Dean Martin, the Copa Room, 2 shows nightly. Inside, the air was thick with cigarette smoke, expensive perfume, and the electric anticipation that only a Dean Martin performance could generate. Dean stood backstage in his dressing room, a tumbler of what everyone assumed was whiskey in his hand, though those closest to him knew it was usually apple juice. The drunk crooner persona was an act, carefully crafted and brilliantly executed. The real Dean Martin was sharp, calculating, and completely in control. 5 minutes, Mr. Martin, the stage manager called through the door. Dean adjusted his bow tie in the mirror, that famous half-smile playing on his lips. At 48 years old, he was at the absolute peak of his powers. His recording career was soaring, his films were box office gold, and his live performances at the Sands were the hottest ticket in Vegas. He was 1/5 of the legendary Rat Pack, Frank Sinatra's right-hand man, and arguably the smoothest entertainer who'd ever walked onto a stage. But tonight was different. Dean could feel it in the air, a tension that had nothing to do with performance jitters. His manager, Herman Citron, burst into the dressing room, his face pale and sweating despite the air conditioning. "Dean, we've got a situation." Dean took a slow sip of his apple juice. "What kind of situation, Herman?" Salvatore, Sally Knuckles Benedetto is in the house. Front row, center table. And he's brought his crew. Dean's expression didn't change, but those who knew him well would have noticed the slight tightening around his eyes. Sally Knuckles was a capo in the Chicago outfit, a man with a reputation for violence that made even other mobsters nervous. He'd earned his nickname from his preferred method of persuasion, breaking fingers, one knuckle at a time. "So Sally wants to see a show," Dean said calmly. "That's what we're here for." "It's not that simple." Herman's voice dropped to a whisper. "Word is he's here to make an example. Apparently, you turned down his nephew for a part in your last picture." Sally took it as a personal insult. Dean set down his glass with deliberate care. "The kid couldn't act his way out of a paper bag, Herman. What was I supposed to do?" "Sally doesn't care about talent. He cares about respect. And he thinks you disrespected his family." The stage manager knocked again. 2 minutes, Mr. Martin." Dean stood, smoothing his tuxedo jacket. "Then I guess Sally's about to learn something about respect." Herman grabbed his arm. "Dean, this isn't a joke. This man is dangerous. Maybe we should cancel." "Cancel?" Dean's voice was soft but carried an edge that made Herman release his grip. "I've never missed a show in my life, and I'm not starting because some two-bit hood wants to flex his muscles. Besides, Frank would never let me hear the end of it." As Dean walked toward the stage, his mind was already working through scenarios. He'd grown up in Steubenville, Ohio, a tough steel town where you learned early how to handle yourself. His father had been a barber who'd dealt with every kind of character imaginable. Dean had learned that the key to handling dangerous men wasn't to show fear, it was to make them laugh. The house lights dimmed. The orchestra struck up the opening notes of "Everybody Loves Somebody." Dean walked onto the stage to thunderous applause, that megawatt smile firmly in place. And there, at the front center table, sat Sally Knuckles. He was a bull of a man, probably 55 years old, with a face that looked like it had been carved from granite with a dull chisel. His suit was expensive but couldn't hide the violence coiled in his frame. 4 men flanked him, his crew, all wearing the same dead-eyed expression that marked them as soldiers. Sally wasn't applauding. He sat with his arms crossed, a cold smile on his face, radiating menace. Dean didn't miss a beat. He launched into his opening number, his voice smooth as aged bourbon, working the crowd with the effortless charm that had made him a star. But he was acutely aware of Sally's eyes on him, tracking his every move like a predator watching prey. Halfway through the first song, Dean did something unexpected. He stopped singing mid-verse, the orchestra trailing off in confusion. The room fell silent. Dean walked to the edge of the stage, directly in front of Sally's table. The spotlight followed him, putting both men in a circle of brilliant light. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dean said, his voice carrying that trademark lazy drawl, "we have a very special guest in the audience tonight. Mr. Salvatore Benedetto, all the way from Chicago." The room erupted in polite applause, though those who recognized the name felt a chill run down their spines. Sally's expression didn't change, but his eyes narrowed slightly. Dean continued, "Now, I understand Mr. Benedetto here is a little upset with me. Something about his nephew not getting a part in my last picture." He paused, timing it perfectly. "But between you and me, folks, the kid's acting was so bad, even his own mother walked out of the audition." The audience laughed nervously, unsure whether this was part of the act. Sally's jaw tightened. One of his soldiers started to rise, but Sally held up a hand, stopping him. Dean pressed on, his smile never wavering. "But you know what? I'm a reasonable guy. So here's what I'm gonna do. Sally, why don't you come up here on stage? Show everyone what real talent looks like. If you can sing better than me, I'll personally put your nephew in my next 3 pictures. Hell, I'll let him play the lead." The room went dead silent. This wasn't part of any script. This was Dean Martin, the coolest cat in Vegas, challenging a notorious mobster to a sing-off in front of 500 people. Sally Knuckles stared at Dean for what felt like an eternity. His face was unreadable, but everyone in the room could feel the danger crackling in the air like electricity before a lightning strike. Then, slowly, Sally began to smile. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a shark that had just spotted blood in the water. He stood up, his massive frame unfolding from the chair. The audience gasped. "You got yourself a deal, Martin," Sally said, his voice carrying a thick Chicago accent. "But when I win, we're gonna have a different kind of conversation. In private." Dean's smile never faltered, but Herman, watching from the wings, felt his heart sink into his shoes. Sally Knuckles was walking toward the stage, and nobody knew what was going to happen next. If you're already hooked on this incredible true story, subscribe to the channel. Hit that like button if you want to see how Dean Martin handles this dangerous situation. This is just the beginning, ****. The Copa Room had seen countless legendary performances, but nothing like this. As Sally Knuckles climbed the steps to the stage, the tension in the room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Women clutched their pearls. Men loosened their ties. Even the waitresses stopped serving, frozen in place. Dean extended his hand as Sally reached the stage. "Welcome, Sally. What's your pleasure? Sinatra? Tony Bennett? Or maybe some Perry Como?" Sally ignored the hand. He walked to center stage, his heavy footsteps echoing in the silent room. When he turned to face the audience, his expression was cold and calculating. "I don't sing other people's songs," Sally said. I got my own. Dean raised an eyebrow, genuinely surprised. You write music? My mother used to sing to me when I was a kid. Before she died. I remember every word. For just a moment, something flickered across Sally's face, something that might have been vulnerability, or pain, or the ghost of a memory from a time before he became Sally Knuckles, enforcer and killer. Dean gestured to the orchestra conductor. You heard the man. Let's see what he's got. Sally closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, something had changed. The menace was still there, but it was joined by something else, something raw and real. He began to sing. The song was in Italian, an old Neapolitan folk tune that his mother had brought from the old country. His voice was rough, untrained, nothing like Dean's polished instrument. But it had something that couldn't be taught, authenticity. Every note carried the weight of memory, of loss, of a little boy who'd lost his mother too young and had grown into a monster to survive. The room was transfixed. This wasn't entertainment, this was witnessing something deeply personal, almost sacred. Sally sang with his eyes closed, and for those 3 minutes, he wasn't a mobster. He was just a man, remembering his mother's voice. When the last note faded, there was a moment of absolute silence. Then the room erupted in applause. Not the polite applause of a Vegas audience, but genuine, moved, thunderous applause. Sally opened his eyes, looking almost surprised. He'd expected mockery, or fear, or contempt. He hadn't expected this. Dean walked over and put his hand on Sally's shoulder. That was beautiful, Sally. Really beautiful. Sally's face hardened again, the vulnerability disappearing behind his usual mask. So I win. Your nephew gets the parts. Hold on, Dean said, that famous smile returning. I said if you sing better than me. We haven't established that yet. The audience needs to vote. Sally's eyes narrowed dangerously. You trying to weasel out of our deal, Martin? Not at all. I'm a man of my word. But fair is fair. Let the people decide. Dean turned to the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, who sang better? If you think Sally here is the winner, give him some applause. The applause was strong, genuine, appreciative. And if you think I should keep my day job? The applause was equally strong, maybe slightly louder, but it was close enough that it could have gone either way. Dean turned back to Sally. Looks like we've got ourselves a tie, Sally. Which means we both win. And we both lose. That's not how this works, Sally growled, his hand moving toward his jacket, where everyone knew he kept a gun. Dean didn't flinch. Instead, he did something completely unexpected. He started to laugh. Not a nervous laugh, but a genuine, warm, infectious laugh. You know what, Sally? You got balls. I'll give you that. Coming up here, singing your heart out in front of all these people. That takes guts. More guts than most of the pretty boys in Hollywood have. Sally's hand stopped moving toward his jacket. Dean continued, and you know what else? You were right. Your nephew didn't get the part because I didn't think he could act. But I never gave him a real chance. I judged him before he even walked in the room because of who his uncle was. The room was silent again, everyone hanging on Dean's words. So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna give the kid a real audition. A fair shot. If he's got even half the heart you just showed up here, maybe he deserves a chance. But I'm not promising anything except fairness. Deal? Dean extended his hand again. Sally stared at him for a long moment. Everyone in the room held their breath. This could still go sideways. Sally could still pull that gun, could still decide that Dean's offer wasn't enough. Then, slowly, Sally reached out and shook Dean's hand. "Deal," he said gruffly. "But Martin? Don't ever disrespect my family again." "Wouldn't dream of it, Sally." The tension broke like a dam bursting. The audience erupted in applause and cheers. Sally's crew, who'd been ready to start shooting at any moment, relaxed slightly. Herman, watching from the wings, nearly collapsed with relief. But Dean wasn't done. "Tell you what, Sally. Since you're up here anyway, why don't we do a duet? Show these people what Chicago and Hollywood can do together." Sally looked at Dean like he'd lost his mind. "A duet? Sure. You know, that's amore. Everyone knows that's amore. Then let's give them a show they'll never forget." And that's exactly what they did. Dean Martin and Sally Knuckles, the smoothest crooner in show business and a Chicago mob enforcer, sang "That's Amore" together on the stage of the Copa Room. Sally's rough voice and Dean's smooth tones shouldn't have worked together, but somehow they did. It was absurd, surreal, and absolutely magical. The audience laughed, clapped along, and witnessed something that would become Vegas legend. When the song ended, Dean and Sally took a bow together. Then Sally leaned in close to Dean's ear and whispered something that only Dean could hear. "You got lucky tonight, Martin. You made me remember something I'd forgotten. But don't ever put me in a position like this again. Next time, I won't be so sentimental." Dean whispered back, "Understood, Sally. But for what it's worth, your mother would be proud of you tonight." Sally's jaw tightened, and for just a second, his eyes glistened. Then he turned and walked off the stage, his crew falling in behind him. As Sally reached his table, he stopped and turned back to Dean. "The kid's name is Anthony. Anthony Benedetto. Give him a real shot." "You got it, Sally." Sally nodded once, then walked out of the Copa Room, leaving behind an audience that would talk about this night for the rest of their lives. Dean watched him go, then turned back to the audience with that trademark smile. "Well, folks, that was interesting. Now, where were we? Oh yeah, I was about to sing some songs and drink some drinks. Not necessarily in that order." The audience roared with laughter and applause, and Dean launched into the rest of his show. But everyone in that room knew they'd witnessed something extraordinary, a moment when entertainment and danger had collided, and somehow, impossibly, entertainment had won. What would you have done in Dean's situation? Drop a comment with your thoughts. And like this video if you're amazed by Dean Martin's courage and quick thinking, ****. The show went on for another 90 minutes, and Dean performed like nothing unusual had happened. He sang, he joked, he charmed the audience with the effortless grace that had made him a star. But those who knew him well could see the slight tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes occasionally flicked toward the exit Sally had used. When the final curtain fell and Dean returned to his dressing room, he found it crowded with people. Herman was there, of course, along with Jack Intrater, the president of the Sands, and two men Dean recognized immediately, FBI agents. "Mr. Martin," the older agent said, flashing his credentials. "I'm Special Agent Morrison, this is Agent Caldwell. We need to talk about what happened tonight." Dean loosened his bow tie and poured himself a real drink this time, he'd earned it. "What's there to talk about? I did a show. Had a special guest. Sang some songs. Just another night in Vegas. That special guest is a known associate of the Chicago outfit," Morrison said. "He's suspected in at least a dozen murders. And you just put him on stage in front of 500 witnesses. He wanted to sing. I let him sing. Since when is that a crime? Agent Caldwell stepped forward. Mr. Martin, we've been tracking Benedetto for months. We believe he's in Las Vegas to expand the outfit's operations. Your interaction with him tonight could be seen as cooperation with organized crime. Dean's expression hardened. Let me tell you something, Agent. That man came here tonight to hurt me. Maybe kill me. I don't know. But I do know that I talked him down without anyone getting hurt. I'd say that's a win for everybody. How did you know he wouldn't just shoot you on stage? Morrison asked. Dean took a sip of his drink. I didn't. But I know men like Sally. They're all about respect, about face. If I'd shown fear, if I'd backed down, he would have owned me. But I gave him something he didn't expect. I gave him a stage. I gave him an audience. I gave him a moment to be something other than Sally Knuckles, enforcer. That's a hell of a gamble, Caldwell said. I'm in Vegas, Agent. Gambling's what we do here. Jack Intrater, who'd been silent until now, spoke up. Gentlemen, I think what Dean did tonight was heroic. He defused a potentially deadly situation and turned it into entertainment. That's what we pay him for. Morrison wasn't satisfied. Mr. Martin, did Benedetto threaten you? Did he make any specific demands? Dean thought about Sally's whispered words, next time, I won't be so sentimental. But he also thought about the vulnerability in Sally's eyes when he sang about his mother, the humanity that had flickered through the monster's mask. He asked me to give his nephew a fair audition. That's all. And you agreed? I agreed to be fair. That's not a crime either, last time I checked. The agents exchanged glances. Morrison pulled out a business card and handed it to Dean. If Benedetto contacts you again, we need to know. This is a matter of national security. Dean took the card and set it on his dressing table without looking at it. If Sally wants to talk to me, he knows where to find me. I'm here every night, 2 shows. After the agents left, Herman collapsed into a chair. Dean, do you have any idea how close you came to getting killed tonight? Pretty close, I'd imagine. This isn't funny. Sally Knuckles doesn't forget. He doesn't forgive. You embarrassed him in front of his crew, in front of 500 people. I gave him respect, Dean interrupted. I gave him a moment to be human. That's not embarrassment, Herman. That's a gift. You think he sees it that way? Dean was quiet for a moment, remembering the look in Sally's eyes when he sang about his mother. Yeah, Herman. I think maybe he does. 3 weeks later, Dean was in his dressing room before the first show when there was a knock on the door. He opened it to find a young man, maybe 25 years old, with dark hair and nervous eyes. Mr. Martin? I'm Anthony Benedetto. My uncle said you'd give me an audition. Dean studied the young man. He had Sally's build but none of his menace. His eyes were clear, hopeful, scared. Come in, Anthony. You want a drink? No, sir. I don't drink before auditions. Smart kid. So, you're an actor? I'm trying to be, sir. I've been studying at the Actors Studio in New York. I know my uncle. I know he put you in a difficult position. If you want to just tell me no, I'll understand. Dean liked him immediately. The kid had integrity, something that was rare in Hollywood and even rarer in Sally Knuckles' family. Tell me something, Anthony. Why do you want to act? Anthony thought about it carefully. Because when I'm on stage, I get to be someone else. Someone who isn't defined by my last name, by my family, by what people expect. I get to be free. Dean nodded slowly. He understood that feeling better than the kid knew. All right, Anthony. Let's see what you've got. There's a script on the table. It's a scene from my next picture. Take a few minutes to look it over, then show me what you can do. What happened over the next hour surprised Dean. The kid could act. Not brilliantly, not yet, but he had something, a raw talent that could be developed, a presence that could be refined. More importantly, he had hunger. He wanted it badly enough to work for it. When the audition was over, Dean made a decision. Anthony, I'm not going to put you in my next picture. You're not ready for that yet. Anthony's face fell, but he nodded. I understand, Mr. Martin. Thank you for the opportunity. Hold on, I'm not finished. I'm not putting you in my picture, but I am going to make some calls. I've got friends who are casting smaller roles, television work, things that will give you experience without throwing you to the wolves. If you're willing to work hard, to learn the craft, to pay your dues, I'll help you. Anthony's eyes widened. You'd do that? After what my uncle did. I'm doing it because of what you did. You came here ready to accept rejection. You didn't trade on your uncle's name or his reputation. You just wanted a fair shot. That's all any of us can ask for. Anthony's eyes glistened with tears. Thank you, Mr. Martin. I won't let you down. Don't thank me yet, kid. This business will chew you up and spit you out if you let it. But if you've got the guts to stick with it, maybe you'll make something of yourself. After Anthony left, Dean sat alone in his dressing room, thinking about the strange turn his life had taken. 3 weeks ago, he'd faced down a killer on stage. Now he was mentoring that killer's nephew. There was a knock on the door. Dean opened it to find a delivery man holding a large package. Delivery for Dean Martin. Dean signed for it and brought the package inside. There was no return address, but he knew immediately who it was from. Inside was a bottle of wine, not just any wine, but a 1947 Chateau d'Yquem, one of the rarest and most expensive wines in the world. Attached was a simple card with 2 words written in rough handwriting. Grazie, amico. Thank you, friend. Dean smiled and set the bottle on his shelf. He'd never drink it. It would sit there as a reminder of the night he'd gambled everything on the belief that even the most dangerous men had humanity buried somewhere inside them. And he'd won. Dean Martin's courage changed lives that night. Subscribe to hear more incredible stories from Vegas's golden age. Comment, do you think Dean did the right thing? ***. The story of Dean Martin and Sally Knuckles became instant Vegas legend. Within days, every entertainer, dealer, and cocktail waitress on the Strip had heard some version of it. Like all legends, it grew in the telling. Some versions had Sally pulling a gun. Others had Dean singing while staring down a dozen mobsters. But those who'd been there that night knew the truth was more remarkable than any embellishment. They'd witnessed something rare, a moment when courage, compassion, and showmanship had transformed a potentially deadly confrontation into something approaching grace. Dean never spoke publicly about that night. When reporters asked, he'd deflect with a joke, Sally. Great guy. Hell of a singer. Needs to work on his stage presence, though. But privately, the experience had affected him deeply. Frank Sinatra heard about it, of course. Nothing happened in Vegas without Frank knowing. He called Dean the next day. "You crazy son of a bitch," Frank said, his voice a mixture of admiration and concern. "You could have gotten yourself killed. But I didn't, Pally. And I got a hell of a story out of it. You know Sally's connected to Giancana, right? Sam's not gonna be happy about one of his guys getting shown up on stage." Dean had considered this. Sam Giancana was the boss of the Chicago outfit, one of the most powerful mob bosses in America, and a friend of Frank's. "I didn't show him up, Frank. I showed him respect. There's a difference." Frank was quiet for a moment. "Sam wants to meet you. Says he wants to hear the story from you directly." "When?" "Tonight. Calneva. Just you, me, and Sam." The Calneva Lodge sat on the border between California and Nevada at Lake Tahoe. Frank owned a piece of it, and it was known as a place where mobsters and entertainers mixed freely, away from the prying eyes of the FBI. That night, Dean found himself sitting in a private room with Frank Sinatra and Sam Giancana, one of the most dangerous men in America. Giancana was smaller than Dean expected, dapper in an expensive suit, with cold eyes that missed nothing. He listened without interruption as Dean recounted the events of that night at the Sands. When Dean finished, Giancana was silent for a long moment, swirling the whiskey in his glass. "Sally called me the next day," Giancana finally said. "Told me the whole thing. You know what he said? He said you gave him something nobody's given him in 30 years. "What's that?" Dean asked. "Dignity. You could have humiliated him. Could have had him thrown out. Instead, you put him on stage and let him be something other than Sally Knuckles, the enforcer. You let him be Salvatore Benedetto, the man whose mother sang him Italian songs." Giancana leaned forward. "That took balls, Dean. But it also took something else. It took understanding. You saw past what Sally is to who he used to be. Not many people can do that." "We're all somebody's son," Dean said quietly. "We all had mothers who loved us once." Giancana nodded slowly. "Sally's nephew, Anthony. You're helping him." "I made some calls. Got him some auditions. The rest is up to him." "That's good. The kid's got talent, but he's been living in his uncle's shadow his whole life. Maybe you're giving him a way out." Giancana paused. "I'm gonna tell you something, Dean. You got a pass that night. Sally was there to hurt you, maybe worse. But you changed his mind. You made him remember he's human. That doesn't happen often in our world." "I'm glad it worked out," Dean said carefully. "But here's the thing, it only works once. You understand? You can't go around challenging made guys, thinking you can charm your way out of it every time. You got lucky with Sally because he's got a soft spot for his mother's memory. The next guy might not." "I understand, Sam." "Good. Because Frank here would be very upset if something happened to you. And when Frank's upset, I'm upset. And when I'm upset, people tend to have accidents." It was said lightly, almost jokingly, but Dean heard the steel underneath. This was Giancana's way of saying he was protecting Dean, but also warning him not to push his luck. Frank, who'd been uncharacteristically quiet, spoke up. "Dean's a smart guy, Sam. He knows how to handle himself." "I'm sure he does." Giancana stood, signaling the meeting was over. "Dean, you ever need anything, you let Frank know. You did right by Sally, and that means something. But remember, in our world, respect is everything. You gave it, you got it back. That's how it should work." After Giancana left, Frank poured them both another drink. "You scared the hell out of me, Pally," Frank said. "But I gotta admit, what you did was pure class. Not many guys could have pulled that off." "I just did what felt right, Frank. That's what makes you special, Dean. You've got instincts. You read people. That's a rare gift." Dean thought about that night, about the moment when he'd looked into Sally's eyes and seen not a monster but a man. "We're all just trying to get through life, Frank. Some of us take darker paths than others, but underneath, we're all the same. We all want to be seen. To be understood. To matter." Frank raised his glass. "To being understood." "To being understood," Dean echoed. Years later, when Dean was in his 70s and his performing days were behind him, a reporter asked him about the most memorable moment of his career. Dean thought about all of it: the hit records, the movies, the Rat Pack shows, the television success. But his mind kept coming back to that night at the Sands, to Sally Knuckles standing on stage singing about his mother. "There was this one night," Dean said slowly, "when I learned that the most important thing you can give someone isn't entertainment or talent or even respect. It's the chance to be human. To be seen as more than what the world has made them." "What night was that?" the reporter asked. Dean smiled that famous smile. "Just another night in Vegas, kid. Just another night." But it wasn't just another night. It was the night Dean Martin proved that courage isn't about being fearless, it's about being afraid and doing the right thing anyway. It was the night he showed that compassion can be stronger than violence, that understanding can defuse danger, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is give someone a chance to be better than they are. Anthony Benedetto did make it in Hollywood, though not under that name. Dean's connections got him steady work in television throughout the late 1960s and early 1970s. He never became a major star, but he made a decent living and, more importantly, he made it on his own merit. Sally Knuckles died in 1972, shot by a rival faction in a mob war. But those who knew him said that in his final years, he'd mellowed slightly. He kept a recording of that night at the Sands. Someone in the audience had captured it on a reel-to-reel tape recorder, and would occasionally play it when he was alone, listening to himself sing his mother's song. Dean Martin continued performing for another 2 decades, becoming one of the most beloved entertainers in American history. He never forgot that night, and he never forgot the lesson it taught him, that everyone, no matter how dangerous or damaged, carries inside them the memory of who they used to be before the world hardened them. And sometimes, if you're brave enough and compassionate enough, you can help them remember. Final reflection *. There's a verse in the Bible that Dean's mother used to quote to him when he was young, from Proverbs 15 verse 1. "A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger." That night at the Sands, Dean Martin proved the truth of those ancient words. He could have responded to Sally's challenge with fear, with aggression, with the kind of machismo that would have escalated the situation into violence. Instead, he responded with gentleness, not weakness, but strength tempered with compassion. He gave Sally a stage, a voice, a moment of dignity. And in doing so, he turned away wrath. It's a lesson that transcends the glittering world of 1960s Las Vegas. In our own lives, we all face moments when we can choose between escalation and understanding, between fear and courage, between seeing people as threats or as human beings carrying their own pain and history. Dean Martin chose understanding. He chose courage. He chose to see the human being beneath the monster. And that choice saved lives that night, including his own. The question we all face is, when our moment comes, what will we choose? Did this story inspire you? Subscribe to this channel for more incredible true stories from history. Like this video if Dean Martin's courage and compassion moved you. And comment below, have you ever had to choose between fear and understanding? How did it turn out? Your stories matter, and sharing them helps us all learn. Thank you for being part of this community, ***.